Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network. We're actually doing this from the junior high state rodeo finals that are taking place in Albion, Nebraska. So when Brad came on camera and I saw his cowboy hat, I thought, how appropriate. But I think it kind of fits what we're going to be talking about today when it comes to this cattle market, as really is cash in the producer's pocket in their corner. We're going to talk more about what cash is like this week, what box beef has been like, and demand. I kind of want to say the proof is in the pudding, or maybe we should say the proof is in the, ribeye steaks that you're eating. We're going to talk more about what is going on with this market. As I mentioned, Brad Kooima, he's with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. So let's talk about this cash, because it seems like at this point, the producers, as I was reading some earlier morning stuff, they were saying, the producers were the ones that were saying, nope, we're holding out for more money.
What you're talking about? First, thanks for having me on. Nice to be back on a Friday and on a monster up day. I'm glad you had a good time on your little trip. I think the word we're looking for here is leverage. Okay. And that would be when, I've said this over and over, there's a very, very fine line between too many and not enough. And, to walk that boundary, if you could figure that out, you and I wouldn't need to be doing this stuff. We just open up on Fridays and go to the bank. But it sure seems to me like the leverage has swung back this way. Of course, today is the day that one of the majors took a holiday, right? No kill. I find it interesting. This is also a week where I should have done the exact math, but I don't know. We're up about $18 on the box beef since the last time you and I talked. Really a nice thing to see that big uptick in the beef. People are saying, well, why? There's some seasonal stuff that cash markets top in this window. And I'm not feeling that way, but there is some, talk about that. But I think maybe just a minute here to talk about how the box beef market maybe sometimes works too. So box beef, it isn't all sold today for tomorrow's delivery. In fact, very little of it's done that way. A lot of it's sold for 2 weeks out, a month out. There's meat sold 3 weeks out. They tell me that there's some entities like cruise ships and those sorts of things, they'll buy an entire meat's worth or lock in an entire year's worth of beef. So if you look at, the uncertainty that the market's had here again the last while with the bird flu story, they read the newspapers too. I wondered if maybe that retailer and that wholesaler maybe thought, well, we better be careful and not have too much out in front, right? Have too much commitment on stuff out front. And got closer to the knife, we would say in our business, only to find out that Mother's Day was a tremendous beef movement weekend. And then now you've got a number 10 rated weather weekend on the East Coast. There's actually somebody I talked to that rates the weather on a 1 to 10 scale. I don't know. Better the weather, the better the demand is the feeling this time of year. So, he put a 10 on with the East Coast for weather for this weekend. So, we may come plowing back in here next week and find out we've got a bunch of reorder business here after another good a weekend of box movement. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not a demand bear at all.
I find it interesting because, if we rewound this conversation that we had 3-4 weeks ago, we were talking about consumer confidence, and you had said, let's get into Mother's Day. Let's see what happens. And obviously it's now officially grilling season. And I think they've taken that information that's been in the mainstream media, the headline chasers, and just said, nope, we're still going to eat beef and roll off the grill because we now know how to cook it.
I like that comment. And I guess I would also give you the disclaimer of I don't want to sit here and say, okay, you don't have to worry about bird flu anymore, because that's not how I feel. But I was encouraged this week. There was 2 days in a row where it seemed like all of a sudden the national news re-picked this whole story back up. And I was hearing some of the same, exactly nearly word for word of the same stories that came out 2 and 3 weeks ago. And I'm going seriously. But now yesterday, there was I read it 3 different places, but even the CDC came out with a little different narrative, I thought. And that was that, even if there would happen to be something in hamburger, if you cook it to 145, it's safe. Our meat is safe. It's safe as long as you cook it properly. Different uses of that sort of phrase, not this, well, we're testing and we're going to keep doing this and that. And they haven't found any workers with any more symptoms or anything like that either, So, maybe the market is breathing just a little easier until whatever the next event is that we seem like we always have to deal with cattle.
You brought up 2014, and we're doing some comparison to that before we went on this program. And I wanted you to kind of expand a little bit more on that, if you would.
That's when I ordered this custom-made hat. Thought I was hot stuff, right? Whatever. I'm not. You get this business will keep you humble. But yeah, that's a nice memory for me. 2014 up until this, that had been what I always called the bull market of my career. And where you basically early in 14, pardon me, you had a bullish cattle and feed report in April. Started to grind higher into May. Everybody was figuring out we got a wall of cattle coming. We got a lot of calves coming. We just ground higher through May. We got into June. Surely there's more cattle. I didn't think there was. And we just went higher the whole year, basically until October, late October. We also had a bullish report in April. Remember? I wish it was easy for me to flip the charts up here and show you how there is some real similarities in this year and that year. And of course, the other similarity is the drawdown in supply. I mean, that's what triggered 14. Was back-to-back droughts in 2011 and 2012, massive cow slaughter, blah blah blah. Sound familiar? And then the beginning of the start of the rebuild of the herd, which holds heifers back, which is when you get into tight supply. So, the fundamental number nerd in me see some similarities because of the massive liquidation of the breeding stock, and just now starting to finally see some anecdotal but also some database signs. We could talk about this for an hour, but I'm starting to see real signs that there is some heifer retention, Susan. And if you look across a weather map, it's raining from Banff, Canada to Corpus Christi. Okay, I mean, we have had a lot of moisture all through the grass country, I believe. Maybe there's an exception or two. Somebody will be mad that they missed a rain. But for the most part, I think, we're set up here where the lack of grass or the lack of feed doesn't seem like probably a real great reason to not see some retention. Now, I get it. For some of these guys, it's still an economic driven deal. And they're telling me, well, I can't afford not to take this price that these guys are willing to give me for a heifer calf. I get it. But there also is that other side of it, that if you're going to be a cow guy, you got to have cows, So I do think that, to think it's way different this time probably is not the correct way to look at it either. Cash, we got to talk about cash because it's been awesome.
Well, it definitely is nice to hear the words heifer retention starting to pick up. But unfortunately, with everything that's good, we got to have one not so good thing. And you were talking about the weights are still kind of an issue for these cattle right now.
Yeah, it's a mystery to me, kind of. I thought, as we transitioned out of the yearlings into the new crop cattle, that's what I've done in my, and that largely would be the case up in this area, where there's hardly any yearlings left to sell. There shouldn't be either this time of year. And now we're transitioning into a calf, which is a lot lighter. And traditionally, you'd see seasonally, these weights would go down very consistently. And this year they have not. In fact, the data from yesterday had the weights only down 1 pound from a week ago, and still, let's see, 892 versus 1 pound above a week ago, and 25 pounds, I believe, over a year ago. Doing quick math in my head, 35 pounds over a year ago. No, 25. I apologize. 25 pounds over a year ago, carcass weight. So why? I mean, the part of this thing is a function, I think, of what the market does to manage supply. When there's less numbers, we still need to have a certain amount of production so we can increase beef production by making them bigger. Some of it's maybe because replacement cattle are awfully high priced, but I really think the biggest reason still for me is that from the middle of February on, we've had nearly perfect growing weather. We had really no mud issue this spring in March and April. And so I think we're benefiting from exceptionally efficient gain here. And maybe that's still part of it. But again, I have a hard time explaining it. I would have thought that, I mean, we're getting 190, 191. Why wouldn't people be selling cattle? And I think they are.
All right. We always appreciate your conversation, Brad, and your thoughts on the market. What's the best place for folks to get a hold of you to further talk some more?
The phone number is 712-722-0023 or pick us up on kkvtrading.com. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I can tell you that hat looks pretty dapper on you.
Yeah.
Just a quick reminder, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss. And that has been this week's Cattle Call on the Rural Radio Network.